Today's attendees expect a well-run logistics. They expect intentional, memorable experiences. As expectations rise, the role of event managers are evolving from executor to experience architect, someone who shapes how people feel, engage, and really remember the event. We're thrilled to welcome Rich Bracken, founder of the Unstoppable Solutions, keynote speaker, and executive coach. Rich, we're so glad to have you here. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Ricky, and welcome everyone to the Day of Days. I'm so excited. I've been looking forward to this event for weeks now, so I'm thrilled that we're here. And if you're not already pumped up because of DJ Graffiti, my guy, like you need, we'll get your energy up there. But thank you to DJ Graffiti, thank you to the Event Professionals Network. I'm thrilled to share this with you. And by the way, congratulations. Congratulations to each and every one of you for coming in third place. And what I mean by that is this, is that event planners have now the third most stressful job in the entire country. Now, I know this is not news to you. I know you're feeling this. This is a very obvious statistic, but it is something that we need to recognize because the pressure is on you to deliver. As a former event planner myself, I understand that as well. So I want to make sure that I give you the value that you need today, but also put in mind that you are going to be able to enhance the event experience for your companies and your events and your conferences very easily and very efficiently, and also keeping in line with your budget as well. So without further ado, I'm here to present how experience architecture will redefine impact. As someone who started my career in minor league baseball, working in events and planning events, I understand how critical this is. And I also understand with a lot of empathy that this is something that we need to do more of, but at the same time, we're always strapped for time. So how are we leveraging time to take a step back and look at the event overall? Because a lot of times we're just trying to get through things. But I want to start off with a very, very honest question. And I want you to drop the number in the chat if you feel comfortable. If not, just think it to yourself. The question is this: on a scale from 1 to 10, how experiential are your events currently? If you think about the event that you're working on now, maybe the last event that you did, on a scale from 1 to 10, was it, ah, crap, I got to go to this meeting? Or was it something that people really look forward to? Was it something that people had a great experience and enjoyed throughout the event? Are you layering in those things to make it an experiential event? So be very honest. I will say that I've thrown my fair share of 1s and 2s just because I want to get things done, but I've also been a part of some 10s. So where is that for you? And what we're going to do today is talk about the different ways that you could take whatever number you're at and take it up a few notches. Because most events are well planned, but they're quickly forgotten. And again, my empathy is going to be off the charts today because I've been in your shoes. I understand what it's like to spend months, if not a year, working on an event, to have it go through a day or 3 days or a week, and all of a sudden it's done and it's on to the next thing. So how are we building in those memorable events to make sure that the impact is there throughout the entire event? Because we tend to go to the default event formula, and that is agenda, AV is staging, speakers, breaks and food, swag, and then we're done. We're just trying to get all the boxes checked because, again, there's a ton of pressure on us to get these things done, to put the event into play, to make all the moving parts come together and look like magic. Every time I work as a keynote speaker, when I work with my event planners, my clients, I make sure that I help them understand that it's not just this boring structure of a formula. We need to take it up a notch. How can we implement those different things to level up the experience, to make sure that the time and the effort and the money that's spent on this event is well worth it? Because impact isn't what happens, it's what's remembered. Now this, I will layer in some shots from some of the events that I've done. This was a healthcare event in Orlando where we had 2,000 people, and it was a great event, but this memory will always stick with me, and I still get emails about this event. I had 2,000 people doing the YMCA during an emotional intelligence keynote because we layered in that experience. We layered in a moment that actually turned the room upside down. So what can we do in little strokes throughout the event to make that happen? Because there are specific things that our brain remembers on the whole when it comes to events. We remember the peaks, we remember the emotional shifts, and we remember the ending. Because there's nothing worse than putting together a smashing event and then it ends on this very like MERP end note. You want to make sure that you stick the landing on an event because you put a ton of time and effort into this event to make sure that it works the way it needs to. So what are we doing to implement those things? Now, as a former DJ myself, and that's why I have to give a lot of respect to DJ Graffiti, this is part of what we do as DJs. We conduct the energy in the room. We build a playlist. DJ Graffiti does a phenomenal job of building a playlist and also incorporating requests, which is really, really hard to do. So much respect and shout out to my guy. But you have to conduct the energy through a set. Anybody can get up there and play music. Anybody can push buttons and pick a song and do the next thing. But as you heard DJ Graffiti say in the intro, he wants to make sure that he's pulling the flow through. And that's the key point about a DJ, a club night, a set, but also an event. So how do I take that energy as a DJ, and how can you take that mentality as a DJ and transfer it? How can you create that vibe? How can you conduct the energy throughout the entire event, whether it's a half day, a 3-day, a 7-day? It's all about the set. You know, I've done 30-minute sets, I've done 6-hour sets, and they all were a little bit different as a DJ. So how are you building up the energy? How are you incorporating things throughout the event to make sure that you're conducting that energy appropriately? Because it comes down to what I consider the experience architecture framework. Now, there are 4 components about this. I'm going to give you the high level look here, and then we're going to dive into each of these individually a little bit deeper. So the first is emotional flow. How are you designing that emotional flow through your event? Because a lot of times we get into here's the opening, here's the intro keynotes, or here's the first breakout session, or here's this, and then there's a break, and we're just stacking the information on top of each other. But what are you doing to pull that story through? How are you pulling your theme through your event? What are you doing to layer in some emotional ties to the theme, to the content, and to the individuals involved? Second, how are you creating attention by design? Most times we just figure that people are going to show up and they're going to pay attention. But as an event planner, as a speaker, as somebody who attends events myself, inevitably we just assume that attention is there. And in the days and age that we now have the attention span of goldfish, this is more important than ever that we create the design to capture and keep the attention. Because you'll inevitably have people that are on their phones or on their laptops, but what can you do to get their attention and keep it? There are different ways that I'm going to show you some examples of how you can do that in your event in very minor budget shifts, or maybe even free, to make sure that you're keeping the attention of the audience. Next, sensory engagement. You have to think about the 5 different senses when you think about your event. Yes, we're going to use sight, and yes, we're going to use sound. How can you use those creatively? How can you layer in a different expectation with the sight and sound? More importantly, how can you layer in smell, touch, taste? There are ways that you can do that to tie to the overall theme to make people remember. Because if I use the word smell right now, and what is your favorite smell? Mine, my grandmother used to make cookies in the kitchen. I could smell that right now, and it takes me back to that memory. But what can you do in little small doses to implement something like that to change the experience? How can you make that event more memorable by layering something very creative like that? And finally, surprise and delight. Now, this is my favorite part of this framework because I'm very much an experienced person, but like the fun things, the unexpected things. And when I worked in minor league baseball, or when I've done events over the course of my career, or even as a keynote speaker, I love that surprise element. I've got a big keynote coming up at CaterSource next week where I'm going to be talking about this element, but I've got some surprises built in there. I'm so excited, and it's hard for me to keep my mouth shut of what they are. But what are you layering into your event to create that surprise and delight? How are you creating that vibe, and how are you creating that moment that people are like, oh my gosh, I never saw that coming? So you could do that in very effective ways. Now let's talk about these individually. We're going to start with emotional flow. Our bad habit is that we just stack the content. We try to get the agenda built to make sure that we're just getting all the things in there. We're putting the right people in, we're putting the right content in, we're creating the timing and the structure of the event, but we're not thinking about the emotion. So instead of opening up with your typical, like, welcome everybody, this is how the day is going to go, we're going to talk about this, how can you have an exclamation point at the front of the day? How can you layer in a video or a surprise performance or something different on the front of the day to get people's attention, to let them know, to signal to them, this is going to be a different experience. You can set the tone from the beginning. Be the DJ of that event and open with an absolute banger of an experience and have people ready to go. One of the images that you saw earlier, that when I was talking about the peaks and setting the tone, that was me kicking off a leadership conference as a DJ keynote speaker, playing music at 8:30 in the morning, which most people would say, there's no way my audience is going to get involved at 8:30 in the morning with music. Like, that may be too intense. 100% incorrect. Music bonds us all, as we saw earlier with the kickoff party with DJ Graffiti. Music bonds us all. So setting the tone and coming out of the gate strong like that is the perfect way to set the tone. Or maybe it's a different experience with your leadership. How can you get your CEO or your COO or your executive team to do something a little bit different? I worked with a company last year that they had their executive team show up in costumes. It was hysterical, but it also changed the tone and made it more vulnerable and more human for the audience members instead of just your typical corporate sales kickoff. So how can you do that? How can you kick things off a little bit differently? And how can you layer in that emotional connection? Maybe it's something, if you're talking about a corporate meeting, how are you bringing in a client story? How are you bringing a client on stage or creating a video that talks about the why of your company? Those emotional connection points are critical to have. Now, second, let's talk about attention by design. Again, trying to get and keep people's attention is it's a big struggle nowadays. So how are we doing these things? And I will say, even as a keynote speaker, as somebody who manages workshops, I make sure that I'm very mindful of the audience. I read the room all the time so that if I see somebody picking up their phone, or maybe somebody's looking a little bit tired because it's after lunch, I will change the variety of my pace, my tone, my volume to change things up. But what are we doing in our events to do the same thing? How are you breaking up the day? Because typically, again, we go to the opening, okay, there's 45 minutes or 60 minutes for the keynote, there's 30 minutes for this or 60 minutes for the CEO to talk. How are you doing it differently? How are you doing maybe a 30-minute opening and then maybe a 60-minute keynote and then a 15-minute this? How can you break things up to make it a little bit more unexpected and keep people's attention? Because if we're going in more minor, micro sessions, you're keeping that momentum flowing in the right direction. But how are you making sure that you're keeping that energy up? Maybe it's breaking out of a slide and telling just a story, making the screen go completely dark, no distractions whatsoever on the screen, and letting someone tell a story. That's just different. People hold on to storytelling. They hear those stories and they latch on from an emotional standpoint. So how can you layer in that element to your event to make sure that you're hitting those notes? Third, sensory engagement. Now, I will say this is critical when it comes to energy flow, but also experience. And I know you probably smell this picture like I do. I'm immediately relaxed. So coming off of the dance party, I'm now more chill because of the lavender smell. But how can you incorporate that? Most times we think after lunch there's going to be an energy dip, so let's just throw a bunch of sugary snacks at them and a bunch of coffee and they'll be fine. But maybe how could you infuse a little bit of a citrus scent in the room? Citrus wakes you up naturally. So if you have a lemon scent or an orange scent, nothing too overbearing, but just enough, that's going to perk people up. How can you incorporate that? How can you do, I think it's Doubletree Hotels has the chocolate chip cookies. How can you bring chocolate chip cookies into the back of the room to signal that there's a break coming? Those different senses that you can incorporate are critical. I use this all the time when I do breakout sessions or when I do workshops, one of these squishy toys. And I use it for idea generation. So when I tell people to brainstorm or talk, I tell them to pick this up and squeeze it as they're talking and coming up with ideas. It de-stresses the individual and it's a touch element. So incorporating things like this is easy to do. And it's just the mindfulness of bringing it to the forefront that it has that as an option. So the next time you're thinking about doing a breakout or a creative collaboration in your event, bring in a squishy toy. Tell people to pick this up and squeeze it while they're talking. It actually triggers more thought process and more creativity and innovation in the process of that conversation. And finally, surprise and delight, my favorite one. I look like this girl, and many a times I figure out how I can create those moments where that surprise and delight comes through. How can you create that unexpected thing? So I'm a humongous fan of a platform called Cameo. It is a platform that you can find a celebrity and they will do a video for you. They will come up with a quick thing that you are scheduling and you are actually creating the script for it. And it is a matter of rolling that video during the session. So imagine that you're on your stage and you're talking about different things, and then all of a sudden a celebrity video comes in and it's a message curated to your audience, curated to your company. And all of a sudden it is, let's just say it's Kurt Angle, a professional wrestler that's challenging your sales team to become more tough and more resilient and more competitive and going out and smashing the competition. I did that for a law firm one time and it broke the room wide open. All of a sudden they had this unexpected bald wrestler yelling at them about being competitive. And it was fun. It was different. And it was a $45 investment just to have that bolt of energy come into the room. But it changed the dynamic of the conversation and it became more of an entertainment experience and it broke up that energy. But it also lifted those individuals who were trying to become more competitive in that session. So I'm going to leave this up so you can see it because the font is a little small, but these are just 5 low budget upgrades that you can put into your event. Music. I'm going to talk about music all the time. Music is my favorite thing to incorporate in an event. But think about your arrival screen. Most times we have the company logo, the event description, or maybe a sponsor role going through. But what can you put up there that says, what do you hope changes for you today? How do you want to walk out of here a better person? Cue that on the front end of your event and get people thinking about how they're going to be listening to the content to become better themselves. I love the idea of reflection before a break. Write down one idea that you don't want to forget, because so many times we're inundated with content, we're inundated with PowerPoints, we're inundated with handouts. But what is the one thing that you do not want to forget from this event? Write that down. And then my favorite one that I've been using lately is I have individuals send themselves an email, send me an email, or go into their calendar 60 days out. And they put in an intentional change that they're going to make so that when that 60 days comes up, because most events, they leave and they go back to their normal life and maybe they learn something, but then it fades away because they went back to their email that they've been ignoring for 3 days. Now, all of a sudden, 60 days later, they've got this reminder that pops up on their calendar that says, hey, are you becoming more emotionally intelligent? Are you planning more breaks before your big meetings? How are you becoming more organized? So that accountability down the road is a lot of fun to implement. Now, these are just 5, but what I've incorporated for this for you all is there is a document. If you scan this QR code, I've got a document out in a Google Drive that has 100 event experiences, things that you can put into your events ranging from low budget to higher budget to change the dynamic of your event. So this is something that I want to provide for you. There's also a self-care booklet in there about implementing more self-care, because that is something that I think we all need to do, but especially in this industry. So you can become more relaxed and more creative just by going through this QR code. But the 3 questions you need to ask before your next event: where is that peak moment? What are you doing in your agenda or your run of show to create those peak moments or a peak moment to make sure that you're having something to aim for? What will event attendees say 30 days later from this event? Or what do you want them to say? And then how do you want people to feel at the end? Because a lot of times we just want to get through the event. We're just trying to get all the things done because we have little resources, little time, and a lot to do. So how can you be more mindful about the event experience for those attendees? So ask yourself these questions before the next event. And then promise me you're going to do these 3 things. Add an emotional intent to every agenda item. And I don't care if it's a minor emotional connection, just something where you're mindful of what emotion and why you're putting that in the agenda, or what you're doing during that break. Design one surprise moment. Again, Cameo is fantastic. Some sort of a surprise giveaway, maybe a scavenger hunt of some sort, a hidden prize under one of the chairs. All of those different things can be really key to an event experience. And finally, close with meaning, not logistics. If you've got a company meeting, or you've got an association or a conference, what are you doing at the very end? What is that punctuation mark that somebody can get up there and deliver their why, or an emotional story that ties to the theme of the event? Leave them on a high, as opposed to, hey, thanks, we're glad you all were here. Let's go out and get them in 2026. Do something different. Find a different way to connect. Because at the end of the day, most events are organized, but fewer architected. And by architecting and building in more emotion into your events, you will make your events feel and experience different. You're shaping memories, not just planning events. So I appreciate you all. I know this network is fantastic. Thank you to Lisa and the team for even having this event and having this organization. Get into it. Figure out what you can do for your events. Lean on each other to come up with new ideas. We're all here to support each other. And again, as a former event planner turned keynote speaker, I love what you do. I respect what you do. Anything I can do to support you all, I am here for it. But thank you all for what you do. You don't get enough praise and enough gratitude for what you do. I see you, I hear you, I understand. Now let's go create some memories together.